Hi there, I'm here to show you guys how to make a Chicago style pizza. For those of you who don't know, Chicago style is actually deep dish, unlike what we call New York, which is what most people have, the flat pizza. So this pizza recipe that we've put together will be one of those recipes that really does rival Chicago pizza. We've had tasted it with ours, and we've also tasted one of our favorite pizzerias out here, and trust me, this really does rival it. So let's actually pan down, take a look at what we've got. So we've got the main ingredient is going to be your Italian sausage. Now notice I'm going to go through everything, but these recipes and these ingredients, you can kind of decide what you want, but this is the stuff that we've decided for this particular one. Two different types of sausages. You've got your mild and your hot. They sell them separately, so you're going to have to mix them together. Your pre-sliced mushrooms, cheeses, mozzarella mostly. We're also going to use the blend of 4 cheese, your onion, pesto, whichever one you like best, any of your favorite pre-made pizza sauces, canned pre-stewed tomatoes, not flavored. They have Mexican and Italian stewed flavored tomatoes. Don't do that. This is just stewed, diced, plain. The one item you might have a little difficulty finding is your fresh basil that's chopped and in a tube. You might have to get that online or look in your grocery store where they have most of your green items. What's neat about this is everything that you see here is pretty much pre-packaged, which means you're not going to have to sit there and slice and shred everything on your own, which is going to cut down a whole lot of time. So we'll put more on this online if you have any interest and you can check to see what that is when you want. So let's move over and look at the crust. We're not going to tout too many different brand labels, but this one we are. King Arthur's flour is the best flour there is. We've tried other ones, and this one actually does taste the best. And if you want a good pizza, gotta have a good crust. Yeast, make the bread rise, gotta have yeast. Any brand will do. The other thing we're going to tout is your salt. Don't use iodized salt, use sea salt. If you're a good cook or you really like cooking, you're going to find that once you switch over to sea salt, it really may make things taste a lot better. Now for the oil and the flour and then the crust, you can use olive oil, but for this particular crust, we're going to make it a little sweeter, so we're actually going to use regular butter. So that's your crust ingredients. The most important utensil you're going to have, and this is something that you might not already have in your kitchens, but you are going to need it, is an actual deep dish for your pizza. It's about 18 inches in diameter, about an inch thick. You're not going to be able to make this pizza without this pan. So if you don't have one, go out and get yourself one. All right, so let's get ready making our pizza crust. So we're going to add in, it's about a 1 teaspoon plus 1 tablespoon of yeast, butter, about 3 tablespoons here. It's already softened, so don't worry about it. Okay, so it's actually 2 cups of flour. So there's 1, there's 2. This is a 2 teaspoons of salt. Now remember, the butter's already salty, so you're not going to need too much salt. And we're going to stick this in there. This is probably different from the way you've used to making bread. We're not going to make the dough where it's doughy. We're actually going to make this to about the consistency, just a little bit under cake mix, so it's a little different. And let's get to mixing. Now remember, if you didn't catch everything I said, you'll find the ingredients list up at the corner, so you'll be able to see everything that we did. Okay, so if you look at the consistency of it, it's pretty cake battery. This is the way we want it. After this, we're going to add some more flour to make it very doughy-like. But for now, we're going to go ahead, let this rise. Trust me, it will rise. And let's get to prepping our inside ingredients. Okay, so remember those 2 packages of Italian sausages? So they were both 16-ounce packages, and we're using half and half of each. So we're going to go ahead and mix our meat together. So let's go ahead and start cooking our sausage. We've got some of it already gone, already cooked. We're pre-cooking it so that when you get to putting it into the pizza in the oven, it cooks thoroughly. That way you don't have any raw sausage left. So we're going to try to get it as thin as you can already, and then we're going to make it even thinner once it gets on the griddle. Okay, so now we're going to do my least favorite part, which is chopping the onions. All right, so there you go. Your onions chopped up and ready to go. watched Italian shows, you can see that you can spend at least, what, 3 hours making this incredible pizza sauce. We're going to cut that time down by less than half. In fact, a fraction of that time. And this is what you need to do. There's your canned diced tomatoes. 1 can. Voila. Your pizza sauce. Alright, so easiest pizza sauce ever. 1. Remember, it's diced, not just the full stewed, diced. In your jar of pizza sauce. Ta-da! No 3 hours here. Okay, so what you can't really see is that the bread rose. It rose about double in size. So, like I said, it was about the consistency of cake mix, as you can see. And it's all nice and rizzy and fluffy. Okay, so now we're going to start adding the flour to make it the consistency of the pizza dough that everybody knows. We're going to do it about a cup, maybe a little bit less at a time. You might want to start slow until you get to that right consistency. There's about a cup's worth of flour, and you can see that it's still sticking to the hook. You're starting to add a little bit of flour, a little more. The dough's starting to pull away from the bowl, and that's what you want to see. Okay, now you can see how it's really pulling away from the bowl and it's starting to ball up. And we're going to let that rest, keep it warm. We're going to let that go for the second rise. Again, you want to make sure it's in a warm area, not hot. Okay, so now we're going to make our pesto sauce that goes on top of the pizza, and you'll see how that goes in a little bit. So we're going to use the full jar pizza, or pesto, for the pizza. So full jar. Okay, so there's your full jar of pesto. Your basil, about 1/3. That's just the way we found we liked it. Oh my god, the vampires are going to stay away tonight. So now that's done. Take your bag. And seal your pesto into the bag. Alright. Alright, so now we're going to put butter on the pan. Remember, we didn't say this was necessarily healthy, so we're going to butter the pan and then we're going to flour it. So, get your hands in there. Okay. So there is the butter on the bottom of the pan, and now we're going to put flour on it. If you knock some out of the pan, don't worry about it because you're going to need it when you roll out the dough on the table. Okay, so buttered and floured and ready to put the dough in. So next we get to roll out the dough. The dough has risen to about a size, about a little more, almost twice as much as it was. So we're ready to give it its first roll, and here we go. Let's get a little more flour on the table. Now remember we said this is a stuffed pizza, so you need to remember you're going to need to make enough for 2 layers. First bottom part, and then you're going to need to have some in reserve because that's going to go in the center. So remember that. First half is back in the bowl, back in here. It rose nice and neat. So this is the second half right here. So we're going to go ahead and roll this out and use it for our bottom layer of our crust. So we've got this thing nice and rolled out, it's nice and thin, so now we're going to go ahead and put this onto our pan and let this bake at that 350 degree oven that we've had preheating. Dough's in the pan and into the bottom rack it goes. It's hot, hot, hot. We just pulled the crust, the bottom crust, out of the oven, and you can see it's a little toasty. It's not totally cooked yet because it's not brown the way you would expect a pizza to be. So let's start with the cheese at the bottom. We're going to use mostly the mozzarella. Okay, so we've got some cheese in there, so now let's go ahead and do a layer of sausage. Spread it around because you're going to have multiple layers to do. So let's do some onions. And dandy assistant there. Some mushrooms, which I can't get freaking open. And let's add a little bit of the 4-cheese blend. And put some sausage. Throw the sausage in the first round. And let's top it off with the rest of the mozzarella. Ooh, it moved. I know you're thinking, where's the sauce? You'll see the sauce in just a minute. Haven't forgotten. Okay, so that ball, the other half that we had there, this is about half of it. We're going to roll this as thin as possible, and we're going to roll it on top of that bit there. And the way we're going to roll it is the way you would use a rolling pin to put the pie crust into a pie tin. So here we go. Now the reason you want this part thin is because remember, this has to cook too. You've already cooked the bottom crust. This has to cook, so if you make it too thin, it'll just end up a goopy mess. Okay, so let's get these thin onto the top of that. And we're going to do this like we do a pie crust. Like so. So usually we would have the bottom crust kind of overlapping so that when you go to seal it, it seals a little better, but in this case we didn't quite have enough, but you get the idea. So we're going to take your rolling pin, roll it across the top. In this case it didn't seal, so we can use some water here to get this to stick better. Okay, so we're going to pop this into the oven just for a few minutes just to get this a little brown. Get back on your bottom rack, and there it is. Okay, so we just took the pizza out of the oven, and you can tell it was just starting to brown a little bit. It's nice and toasty. So let's go ahead and pile on the last of our pizza stuff. Yes, all of it. Spread it around. Okay, so remember that pizza, that pesto sauce we made a little earlier? So now we're going to add that. Cut the tip. We're going to do a little piping. Okay, so there is our pesto. So now we're going to put this into the oven. This is the longest part of the whole cooking process. It's going to take between 40-45 minutes. And you'll know it'll be done when you see the middle part bubbling over. If you start to notice the edges browning before it starts to bubble in the middle, you can put aluminum foil around the edge to keep the edges from burning. But don't be tempted to take it out too early because you really want to make sure all the cheese has melted in and all the flavors get mushed together. So let's put this back in the oven. Like I said, 40-45 minutes. It weighs go, let it go. Again, don't be tempted to take it out earlier. You won't get all the flavors all melted together and it just won't taste right. So let's let that go. Okay, so we just pulled it out of the oven. It's been about 45 minutes. Come in closer and pan down to this. Does that look freaking gorgeous or what? And trust me, if you could smell it, you'd be all over this thing like ugly on an egg because it smells fabulous. So let it cool down. Let it sit about 10 minutes or so. Let it cool down, let everything get nice and melty together. And bon appetito, manja, enjoy. And yeah, like we said earlier, change up the ingredients if you want. But we're gonna mow because we've got a room full of hungry people and they're getting cranky. So hey, enjoy your meal and see you soon. Bye guys.